Hey guys, tonight you are lying beneath a rough ridgepole in a one-room sod house on the Great Plains, with cold air touching your face and no weather forecast. Electric light, central heating, or sealed modern walls between your family and the wind. The house is low, heavy, and made from the ground around it. Its walls are blocks of prairie sod, cut thick enough to hold the tangled roots together. Above you, poles carry brush, grass, more sod, and loose earth. The ridgepole runs through the darkness like the spine of a sleeping animal. Each time the wind leans against the roof, the timber answers with a small complaint. That sound is what keeps you awake. Before we settle farther into the night, take one slower breath than usual. Let your shoulders loosen against whatever is supporting you now. There is nothing you need to repair. No chimney to inspect, no latch to test. You only have to listen while another household carries those duties for you. Outside, the prairie offers the wind almost nothing to stop it. There are no close ranks of trees around the claim, no brick buildings, no paved streets. The land opens for miles. By day, that openness can feel generous. It gives you sky, grass, room for crops, and the possibility of ownership. At night, when a storm moves across it, the same openness becomes a long approach road for the wind. You hear it arrive before it reaches the house. First comes a low rushing over the grass. Then a harder gust touches one wall and slides around the corners. Something dry scratches outside. A loose board near the door gives a dull tap. The stovepipe hums. Dust shifts above the ceiling cloth. Your youngest child turns under a blanket, not fully awake, but listening with the body in the way children do. You remain still. That is not because you feel perfectly safe. It is because homesteading has taught you that reacting to every sound wastes strength. The Great Plains are noisy in bad weather. Sod settles, timber dries and moves, doors breathe against their frames, roof grass rubs beneath the weight of earth. The chimney changes its voice when the wind crosses the opening at a new angle. The first skill of sleeping through a windstorm is not courage. It is learning which noises matter. Tonight, however, you have not learned them all. This is still an early house on a relatively new claim. Perhaps the family first lived in a wagon, dugout, or smaller shelter. The sod house is supposed to be the improvement. Its thick walls do not rattle like thin boards. Its low profile does not present much height to the storm. Earth has mass. It does not jump at every gust. But mass creates its own uneasiness. The roof above you is not light. The same soil that resists the wind is resting over your bed. The ridgepole and smaller timbers carry that burden through every season. You know where the strongest supports stand because you watched them being placed. You know which pole was slightly crooked and which wall section had to be rebuilt after the sod slumped. A finished house can hide the memory of its making from a visitor. It cannot hide it from the people who built it. Another gust arrives. This one is stronger. The door presses inward, then eases back against the latch. A spoon touches a bowl. The flame in the stove changes. For 1 second, the room seems to inhale through every crack at once. Your hand moves from beneath the blanket. You do not get up yet. You rest your palm in the air near the bed, feeling for a new draft. Cold, moving air can reveal a gap before your eyes find it. You turn toward the stove and smell warm iron, old ash, wool, damp earth, and the faint animal smell carried in on boots. Nothing has changed enough to require action. So your hand returns beneath the blanket. This small decision is part of how the family sleeps. Rest comes in pieces, protected by judgment. A few minutes of stillness, a brief waking, a sound measured against memory, then another descent. Modern sleep often assumes that the building will remain stable without your attention. Here, the household and shelter are still working together. The house gives protection because people gave it shape, thickness, and weight. It continues to protect because someone notices when that shape begins to fail. During the day, the claim demands visible labour. Sod must be broken, water must be carried, fuel must be gathered or bought, animals must be watched, food must be guarded from damp, pests and spoilage, fences, tools, clothing, harness and roof all ask for repair. At night, the labour becomes quieter. Someone banks the stove, someone checks the latch, someone moves a blanket away from a damp wall, someone remembers whether the cow was secured, someone lies awake long enough to decide that a roof creak has not become a roof shift. Often that someone is not the person who receives credit for building the claim. A homestead may be recorded under one name, but a household survives through many bodies: adults, older children, neighbours, and sometimes hired hands or relatives. Work follows age, strength, custom, necessity, and sometimes unfairness. Sleep does too. The warmest place is not always the most comfortable. The safest position may belong to the youngest child. A parent may sleep nearest the stove because the fire may need attention. Someone may take the outer edge of the bed because they are most likely to rise. Privacy is limited. Even dreams are communal when several people breathe in one room. The wind presses again. This time the sound travels across the roof. You can follow it above you. A soft rush, a heavier drag, then a brief pattering of loose dirt. The ridgepole gives one dry knock where it meets another timber. Your eyes open fully. Across the room, another adult is already awake. Neither of you speaks. There is no need to wake the children for a sound that may mean nothing. In the dim red light from the stove, you see a shoulder lift. Both of you listen. The door holds. The chimney hums but does not cough smoke into the room. No soil falls in a steady stream. No supporting pole groans under movement. The shoulder lowers. You close your eyes again. This is the promise of the sod house, but not yet the answer to the title. Thick walls may blunt the wind, yet the walls exist only because a family first chose where to place them. The roof may hold, yet its strength depends on materials that were scarce, uneven, and difficult to carry. The stove may warm the room, yet fuel must come from somewhere on a landscape with little timber. Every layer of safety hides an earlier decision. And before you can understand how homesteaders managed to sleep while the prairie storm moved over them, you have to leave this bed in daylight and walk outside, across the open claim, to the ground where the house was not yet standing. There, with the wind already pulling at your clothes, the first night's protection begins as a question of where to dig. The question begins under your boots. In daylight, the storm is still only a hard wind moving over brown grass, but it already shows you what the night will become. It pushes at your coat, lifts dust from the broken ground, and presses the fabric against your legs. Out here, nothing hides the direction of the weather. The grass leans, loose soil travels, a scrap of cloth tied to a wagon bows toward the east. You turn slowly and study the claim. The survey stakes describe a new federal claim, not an empty history. Long before this rectangle was marked for settlement, native peoples had lived, travelled, hunted, traded, and formed communities across these plains. The new lines on the ground belong to a different political system, one that has arrived with laws, survey chains, land offices, and the power to call this place available. That larger history will not disappear when the first wall rises. For the family standing here now, however, the immediate problem is wind. A house can be made thick, but if it is placed badly, the weather will spend every storm striking it at full force. A few yards of elevation may change how exposed a wall feels. A shallow fold in the land may reduce direct pressure. A bank, creek cut, or low rise can become part of the building before the first sod brick is lifted. This is not architectural theory. It is knowledge learned through discomfort. You stand where the family first considered building and feel the wind hit your chest. Then you walk down slope. The sound changes slightly. The force does not disappear, but it becomes less clean and direct. The rise interrupts the lowest current. Grass no longer flattens with quite the same violence. That difference is small. At night, small differences matter. A homesteader must balance needs that do not agree. The house should be near water but above runoff, close to animals but away from their mud and smell, below the exposed crest but on ground dry enough to support walls and bedding. The best wind shelter may be too damp. The driest place may be too far from the well. A view that feels generous in summer may become a punishment in January. You are not searching for a perfect direction. You are looking for a small reduction in exposure, a bank, a shallow fold, or the sheltered face of a rise. One Nebraska account advised placing a dugout on the eastern face of a slight hill, where north winds were less likely to pack snow against the entrance. That is one local solution, not a law for the whole plains. You scrape the soil with a boot heel. Dry earth loosens near the surface, but beneath it the roots hold the prairie together. Those roots are valuable. They make sod blocks possible. They also make digging slow. A dugout offers the most direct use of the earth. Instead of raising every wall above ground, the family cuts a room into a bank or slope. The roof stays low. Undisturbed earth blocks part of the wind and slows sudden changes of temperature. Where timber is scarce and money is thinner than the doorboards, a dugout can be built sooner than a frame house and with fewer purchased materials. It can also be dark, damp, cramped, and vulnerable to water. A floor cut too low may collect runoff. A wall made from exposed earth may shed soil. A roof too flat may leak. The same bank that blocks the wind can hold moisture against the room. The family walks the ground again. Someone traces the path rainwater would take. Someone measures the distance to the well. Someone imagines hauling fuel through snow or finding the door when darkness erases the yard. The wind simply tests each position. Near the top of the rise, it catches your hat brim. Below the crest, it pulls more gently. Farther down, the soil feels damp. You begin to understand why the final choice is rarely perfect. A homestead site is a compromise between weather, water, labour, land rules, crop ground, road access, and whatever materials can actually be obtained. The family may know the best place and still build somewhere else because the well is already dug, because the wagon cannot reach the slope, because the roof poles must come from a distant creek, or because winter is too close for another week of delay. Historical survival is full of imperfect decisions. The house begins with calculation under pressure. New arrivals may rely on neighbours, earlier settlers, local builders, or abandoned structures. They learn where snow drifts, where rain enters, and why a broad view may be a miserable place for a doorway. The doorway matters more than its size suggests. Each opening weakens the shelter. Doors admit people, tools, air, dust, insects, and sometimes water. Windows bring light, but glass costs money, and the frames create gaps. A family wants daylight and ventilation, yet every opening becomes a place the wind can search. So the house is placed not only for its walls, but for the direction its openings will face. You stand where the future door may be, and imagine a winter gust striking it directly. The latch shudders. Snow or dust pushes beneath the sill. Each person entering the room releases stored warmth. Turn the doorway away from the strongest winds, shelter it behind a bank, or create even a shallow entry, and the same door becomes easier to manage. Again, the improvement is measured in reduced effort. At night, the body does not need the storm to vanish. It needs the house to demand fewer decisions. A better site means fewer violent door movements, fewer drafts reaching the bed, fewer roof edges taking direct pressure, and fewer moments when someone must leave the blankets to inspect a sound. The hill does not comfort you. It simply takes part of the work. By afternoon, stakes define a rectangle. It looks small against the open land, though it must soon contain beds, stove, food, clothing, children, tools, wet boots, and nearly every private moment of household life. You move to the windward side and look across the grass. The rise stands behind the proposed wall. It is not high enough to stop the weather, but it will spoil the wind's clean approach. The future roof will remain close to the earth. The walls will present less surface than a tall frame house. Weight and position will work together. Low ground, but not wet ground. Earth behind the wall. A door turned away from the hardest gusts. A roof kept close to the prairie. Distance shortened between shelter, water, fuel, and animals. Each choice removes a little labour from the night. The wind continues over the claim, indifferent to the marked rectangle. It crosses the stakes as if no house will ever stand there. In a sense, that is the challenge. The family must create resistance from materials the landscape appears unwilling to provide. There is little lumber. There may be no nearby stone. Money is limited. The strongest building material lies flat beneath your feet. A plough, spade, or sod cutter is brought forward. The first line is scored into the prairie. Steel enters the roots with a dense tearing sound. The ground that sheltered nothing a moment ago begins to separate into pieces that can be lifted, carried, stacked, and made to bear weight. Before the walls can quiet the wind, the family must cut the prairie apart and teach it to stand upright. The steel enters the prairie again. This time the sound is slower and heavier than ordinary ploughing. The blade does not simply turn soil for planting. It must cut long strips through a living mat of roots, grass, and packed earth without breaking them apart. The strength of the future wall depends on those roots remaining tangled. You lean into the work. The ground resists with a toughness that is easy to underestimate from a distance. Prairie grass looks soft when the wind moves over it. Underneath, its roots knit the soil into a dense fabric. A good sod block is not merely dirt. It is earth reinforced by the plant life that has held it together through heat, frost, grazing, and drought. That natural reinforcement is why the wall can stand. It is also why each block is difficult to cut. A sod plough, where one is available, slices beneath the root layer and separates a ribbon of turf. A spade, knife, or sharpened tool divides the ribbon into manageable lengths. The blocks must be thick enough to hold, but not so large that one person cannot lift them safely. If the sod is too dry, it crumbles. If it is too wet, it becomes heavy, slippery, and exhausting. In one Nebraska diary from 1876, the cut blocks were described as roughly 2 feet long, a foot wide, and 4 inches thick. Your own pieces are not required to match them. Soil, tools, grass roots, and local habit decide the dimensions. But the recorded measurements reveal the scale of the labour. Hundreds of broad, damp blocks lifted by hand until the prairie stands higher than your head. You lift the first piece. It bends slightly in your hands. Grass lies on one side, dark soil on the other. Fine roots cross the broken edge like threads in rough cloth. The block is heavier than it looks. By the time you carry it to the marked foundation, soil has entered your sleeves and grass seeds cling to your trousers. One block changes nothing. A wall requires hundreds. The work develops a rhythm: cut, separate, lift, carry, turn, place, then return and do it again. The first course is laid carefully. It must be broad and level because every later layer depends on it. Some builders place the blocks grass side down. Others alternate directions or lay them in methods learned from neighbours and local practice. The technique varies, but the purpose remains clear. Overlap the joints and prevent the wall from becoming a pile of separate squares. You press one block against another. Loose soil fills the gaps. A knife trims an uneven edge. Someone checks the line of the wall and points out a bulge before it grows into a serious weakness. Small errors are corrected now because later they will be hidden beneath weight. A mistake near the ground becomes a problem near the roof. The wind continues while you work. It dries exposed surfaces, lifts loose dirt, and brings grit into your eyes. Sometimes it helps by cooling sweat. More often it steals moisture from the sod and forces you to cover or place the blocks before the edges begin to crack. Your back starts to ache long before the wall reaches your knee. Hands become raw where soil grinds against the skin. Shoulders tighten. The body learns which blocks are safe to lift alone and which require another pair of hands. Children may carry smaller pieces, fetch water, move tools, or clear loose grass. Someone prepares food while still taking part in the construction. Labour does not separate neatly into builder and household. The house rises because ordinary work is rearranged around it. By midday, the future room is outlined by low earthen walls. From outside, it still looks like a shallow enclosure. From within, the effect is already different. When you stand between the courses, the wind reaches less of your legs. The sound of the open prairie is slightly reduced. The shelter is not yet usable, but the body recognizes the beginning of protection before the mind trusts it. That small change encourages everyone. Another course is added. The blocks cross the seams below like rough bricks, though they are softer, irregular, and full of roots. Corners require particular care because two walls must support each other while remaining joined. You turn a block and fit it across both directions. It is not perfect. None of them are. Sod construction depends less on identical pieces than on patient adjustment. A block that is thick on one side may be paired with a thinner one. A gap may be packed. A damaged corner can be trimmed away. The wall becomes solid through accumulation, compression, and correction. The work cannot be rushed simply because weather is approaching. Speed may produce height, but not strength. A poorly bonded wall can crack, bow, or shed sections under its own weight. Rain can soften exposed surfaces. Animals may rub against them. The wind only needs to find a loose edge and work on it season after season. So each layer is examined. You step back and look along the wall. It rises unevenly, but steadily. The grass roots form dark lines between courses. The room grows deeper as the walls climb. Outside light still falls across everything, yet the wind now passes over more of your body instead of through it. By late afternoon, the labour has entered your movements. You no longer straighten fully after every lift. You rest one hand on your thigh before standing. Dirt has worked beneath your nails and into the creases of your neck. The taste of soil appears whenever you wipe your mouth with a dusty sleeve. This is the hidden cost inside the phrase, built from the land. The land is available, but it is not free. It asks for time when crops need attention, for animal strength, tools, food, and bodies that can continue after the first enthusiasm has worn away. Families with more money may buy lumber or hire help. Poorer households must make the earth perform more jobs for longer. The wall does not care who is exhausted. It simply requires another course. As the sun lowers, you place a block near the future bed wall. For the moment, it is only part of the structure. Later, it will stand beside blankets, clothing, perhaps a shelf or a trunk. In winter, someone may press a hand against it and feel cold moisture. During a windstorm, the same wall may remain almost motionless while the door shakes. Protection and discomfort will occupy the same surface. The sod walls will soften noise, slow drafts, and provide heavy resistance against the wind. They will also shed dirt, shelter insects, absorb water, and demand repair. A practical home is rarely a perfect one. Its value lies in what it prevents, what it reduces, and what the family can endure within it. Another block is carried forward. You place it carefully, grass and roots binding into the layer below. The wall has reached your waist now. When you crouch inside the rectangle, the strongest gusts pass above your head. For the first time, the marked ground feels less like open prairie and more like a room. But a low wall cannot yet carry the enormous weight planned for the roof. It must rise higher without leaning. Open spaces must be left for door and window, and every corner must remain joined while the earth settles under itself. The prairie has begun to stand upright. Now the family must prevent it from falling inward. The danger is not dramatic at first. A wall does not suddenly announce that it intends to lean. It shifts by degrees. One course sits a little farther inward than the one below. A corner begins to round. A gap opens where two blocks should press together. Under the weight of more sod, every small mistake becomes patient. You stand inside the rising room and look upward. The walls are now high enough to block most of the wind at body level. That changes the work. Earlier, the prairie struck you from every direction. Now the air moves over the top and curls downward into the unfinished room. Dust falls from the exposed edges. Voices sound closer. The house begins to create its own weather before it has a roof. It also begins to create its own risks. A thick sod wall is strong because of mass, width, and the roots holding each block together. But mass must be kept in balance. If the wall grows too narrow as it rises, or if wet sod settles unevenly, the upper courses may drift. Corners must be tied together. Openings must be bridged. The structure must remain broad enough to carry what will eventually rest above it. You place another block near the corner. It is turned across the joint, locking one wall into the next. The following block crosses from the opposite direction. The pattern is not elegant, but it prevents the two walls from behaving like separate stacks. The corner becomes a woven place rather than a simple meeting. Someone outside calls that the line is beginning to bend. You step back. From close range, each block looks acceptable. From several yards away, the wall reveals a slow inward curve. A cord stretched between stakes shows the error more clearly than the eye. Two recent courses must be lifted and reset. No one enjoys undoing heavy work. Still, removing 10 blocks now is easier than rebuilding a collapsed section after the roof is loaded. The family pulls them down. Loose soil spills. One block breaks at the edge and must be trimmed. Another is too dry to trust and is set aside for filling rather than bearing weight. The wall rises again. Straighter this time. This repeated correction is part of the house's strength. The final structure will look solid because its uncertainties have been buried inside it. A visitor may see only thick earth. The builders remember every place where the line wandered, where a corner opened, where a block cracked under lifting, and where someone said, quietly, that it had to be done again. The openings are harder. A doorway interrupts the wall from ground to lintel. A window removes a section of mass and replaces it with a frame that must fit well enough to resist movement. Above each opening, the weight of the wall and roof must pass around empty space. Empty space is useful to a family. It is also useful to the wind. The door frame is made as square as the available lumber allows. Purchased boards may be precious, saved from packing crates, hauled from a distant town, or cut from the limited trees near water. The frame is braced before the sod presses against it. Blocks are fitted tightly along both sides. You place one beside the upright timber and notice a narrow gap. It looks harmless in daylight. At night, a gap like that can become a thin blade of cold air beside the bed. Dust can enter. Rain can follow the grain of the wood. A loose frame can work against the wall each time the door moves under pressure. So the gap is packed. Mud, smaller sod pieces, grass, or whatever material the household trusts is pressed into the space. It will not remain perfect forever. Drying, settling, and repeated use will change it, but a home on the plains is not built once. It is built, then watched. The window is smaller than a modern sleeper might expect. Glass is expensive and fragile. A large window brings light but weakens the wall, loses heat, and gives the wind a broader surface to strike. A small opening is easier to frame and cover. It admits less daylight, but it also asks less of the structure. The family chooses necessity over brightness. Inside, the room becomes dimmer as the walls rise above shoulder height. Sunlight reaches through the unfinished roof and through the open door, but the lower parts of the room already fall into shadow. You can begin to imagine winter here. Pale window light, stove glow, damp boots near the entrance, blankets against the darker wall. The room feels small. From outside, the house appears broad and heavy. From within, thick walls consume space. The same mass that resists the wind narrows the living area. Furniture must fit around the stove. Beds must leave a path to the door. Food, tools, clothing, lamps and water containers must occupy the same protected volume as the family. Protection is measured in crowded inches. The final courses approach roof height. Each block is lifted higher now. Arms tire sooner. A platform, wagon bed, or rough scaffold may be used to bring material within reach. Soil drops into hair and collars. The wind catches loose grass from the upper courses and sends it across the room. Then the main roof timber arrives. It is not grand, it may be the straightest substantial pole the family could obtain, which is different from being truly straight. Transporting it may have required animals, neighbours, or a long journey to a creek or wooded area. On a treeless claim, a single long piece of timber carries more value than its appearance suggests. This is the ridgepole. You run a hand along its surface. The wood is rough, marked by tool cuts and knots. One end is slightly thicker. A shallow bend runs through the middle. The pole must be positioned so that its natural shape works with the load rather than against it. Temporary supports are raised. The ridgepole is lifted slowly, one end at a time. People call to one another. Hands shift. A support slips half an inch and is corrected. For a moment, the timber hangs above the unfinished room, and everyone beneath it becomes aware of its weight. Then it settles into place. The house changes. Until now, the walls have been separate efforts rising from the ground. The ridgepole gives them direction. Roof supports will lean toward it. Weight will travel from the roof into the walls through a connected system. The entire room now seems organized around this one line of wood. Later, lying beneath it, you will hear every change. A dry knock may mean ordinary contraction. A low creak may come from wind loading the roof. A sharper sound may pull you fully awake. The ridgepole will become both reassurance and warning because it carries what you cannot see in darkness. For now, it stands bare against the sky. The wind crosses the unfinished house and touches it from the side. The pole moves almost imperceptibly on its temporary supports. Everyone notices. More bracing is added before the day ends. The walls are checked once again. Corners are pressed and packed. Door and window frames are tested. No one calls the structure safe yet, because the heaviest part has not been placed. The ridgepole may be the house's central promise. But a promise is not a roof. The promise remains open to the sky. For the moment, the ridgepole carries almost nothing. Wind passes around it freely. Sunlight falls through the unfinished frame and reaches every corner of the room. The walls are high. The door and window are shaped. But the house still offers no protection from rain, snow, or the enormous darkness of a plains night. The roof must close that opening. It must also do something more difficult. It must resist the wind without becoming so heavy that the walls beneath it spread. Bow or fail. You stand beside a pile of poles and sort them by length. The straightest pieces are placed first. Their upper ends rest against or near the ridgepole. Their lower ends reach the wall tops. Together they form the sloping bones of the roof. The angle is modest. A low roof offers less surface to the wind, but if the slope is too shallow, water will linger and find its way downward. A steep roof may shed rain better. A low roof may resist the wind better. The family builds with the materials, labour and judgment available, not with perfect engineering. Each pole is lifted into position. Some are round, some are flattened slightly where they touch the ridge. Knots create gaps. One piece must be turned until its natural bend lies safely. Another is rejected because a hidden split opens when weight is placed on it. Timber is scarce enough that rejection hurts. A poor roof pole, however, will cost more after the earth is above it. Once the main supports are secure, smaller branches or willows are laid across them. These pieces spread the load and create a rough platform. Brush, reeds, or grass follow. Their job is not to carry the roof alone. They prevent the next layer from falling through every opening between the poles. One documented Nebraska roof used round elm, ash, and cottonwood rafters, then willows, a thin sod layer, and roughly 6 inches of dirt. Your roof follows the same practical logic even where its exact materials differ. Timber carries, brush bridges, roots bind, and earth supplies the weight. You look up from inside. The sky is divided into narrow strips. With each layer, the light becomes softer. The wind no longer moves cleanly through the room. It presses against the new surface, slips through remaining gaps, and shakes loose leaves and dust onto the floor. The house is beginning to sound enclosed. That change feels reassuring, but the heaviest work is still waiting. Sod is carried upward. Blocks that were difficult to lift onto the walls must now be raised above shoulder height. A wagon, platform, ladder, or rough scaffold shortens the distance. People pass pieces from hand to hand. Soil breaks from the edges and falls into eyes. Grass brushes faces. Arms tremble from holding weight where the body is least comfortable. The first sod is placed carefully over the vegetation layer. Then another. Courses spread from one side of the roof toward the other. Joints are overlapped where possible. Gaps are packed. The blocks begin pressing the brush and smaller branches firmly onto the supports beneath them. The ridgepole accepts its burden gradually. At first, it gives no sound. Then, as more sod is placed, the wood produces a low, settling creak. Everyone stops. The noise is not loud, but it comes from the centre of the house. You watch the temporary posts. You examine the walls where the roof poles meet them. Nothing appears to move. Work resumes more slowly. A roof made from earth gains resistance through weight. Strong wind cannot easily lift what is broad, low, and heavy. The same principle that made the walls useful now protects the top of the house. Weight, however, must remain controlled. Fresh sod contains moisture. Rain adds more. Snow may settle above it. Loose earth used to fill and level the surface increases the load. Weak poles can bend. Poor joints can open. Walls can be pushed outward. If water enters and remains, rot may begin where no one can easily see it. The roof protects the family by placing a measured danger overhead. This is why the builders remember every pole. You know which one came from the creek bottom. You know which was already weathered. You know where a joint required extra support. Years later, when the wind crosses the roof at night, those memories will return before your feet touch the floor. Another strip of sod is laid. Inside, the room grows dark enough that someone lights a lamp. Though the door remains open, the small flame reveals floating dust. It also reveals the shape of the ridgepole more clearly now that the sky behind it has disappeared. The pole has changed from an object in open air to a line holding darkness apart. Outside, loose soil is spread over uneven places. Some roofs receive additional layers of grass or earth according to local methods and available materials. The household wants a surface compact enough to resist wind and shed at least some water. Yet no arrangement makes a sod roof equal to modern sealed roofing. Rain will search it. Water can enter around the chimney, along a poorly fitted seam, through cracked earth, or where the roof settles. During dry weather, the surface may harden. During wet weather, it may soften and become heavier. Grass might grow above the family. Roots may bind part of the surface while also holding moisture. A roof can look alive while the room beneath it remains damp. The builders finish one section and test it from below. A person presses upward gently against a smaller pole. Another watches the wall. The roof does not visibly shift. That is not proof of perfection. It is enough to continue. By late day, the last open strip narrows beside the ridge. The sky becomes a thin blue line. Then the final sod closes it. For the first time, you stand inside the completed shell of the house. The wind remains outside, but not entirely. It whispers through the door frame. It finds the chimney opening that is not yet fully sealed. It presses faintly through gaps that will need mud, cloth, paper, or more careful packing. Still, the change is remarkable. The open roar of the prairie has become a distant movement over the roof. Thick walls and earth above reduce the sharpness of the gusts. The room feels still enough that you notice smaller sounds: boots on packed soil, the scrape of a tool, breath, clothing, the soft fall of loose dirt from overhead. You look up. The ridgepole is now almost hidden behind shadow and roof structure. It bears poles, brush, sod, earth, and every future storm that will cross the claim. A small clump of soil drops near your feet. No one is alarmed. New roofs settle. Gaps are expected. The surface will be checked and patched. Construction tools remain close because the house is not finished merely because the sky has disappeared. The family has gained shelter from the wind. Now it must discover what that shelter does to the lives crowded beneath it. Beds, stove, table, food, wet clothing, tools, and bodies must all fit into the protected space. The roof has closed the prairie out, but it has also closed everyone in. The first bed has nowhere obvious to go. Against one wall, it would be farther from the door but closer to damp earth. Near the stove, it would be warmer but exposed to sparks, smoke, and the feet of anyone rising during the night. Beneath the ridgepole, the roof seems strongest, yet every sound from above will travel directly into the sleeper's body. The room is protected now, but protection has created a problem of arrangement. You stand inside the sod house while the family begins moving life into it. A table comes first because it can serve many purposes: eating, sewing, repairing harness, preparing food, sorting seed, holding a lamp, and sometimes supporting a basin or sick child. A chest follows, then sacks, tools, bedding, crockery, clothing, and the few objects too valuable to leave near weather or animals. Each item claims space that cannot be replaced. The thick walls have made the outside dimensions deceptive. From the prairie, the house looked broad. Inside, several feet of earth have disappeared into the walls themselves. Every object now affects how bodies move. A path must be kept clear from bed to stove. Another must reach the door. Someone must be able to carry water without striking the table. A person rising in darkness should not step on a child, knock over a lamp, or catch clothing on a tool handle. During calm weather, a crowded room is inconvenient. During a windstorm, when people wake suddenly and move by touch, clutter becomes danger. The stove decides more than any other object. It provides heat, cooks food, dries wet clothing, warms water, and gives the room its evening light. It also consumes fuel, produces ash, demands ventilation, and divides the house into warmer and colder zones. A small child may sleep close enough to benefit from the heat, but not close enough to touch hot iron. An older person with aching joints may need the same position. Whoever tends the fire must be able to reach it quickly. Bedding must remain far enough away that a falling spark does not turn warmth into flame. So the beds are fitted around duty as much as comfort. There may be a wooden bedstead if materials and money allow. There may be a rope bed, a mattress filled with straw, corn husks, hay, feathers, or whatever the household can obtain and maintain. Children may share. Someone may sleep on a pallet that can be moved during the day. The exact arrangement varies, but the principle does not. No sleeping place belongs only to the sleeper. A bed near the door belongs partly to the person who must answer it. A bed near the stove belongs partly to the fire. A bed beneath a leak belongs partly to the weather. A child's place belongs partly to whoever wakes to cover them when the room cools before dawn. You help move the first frame toward the rear wall. The ground beneath it has been levelled and packed, though it remains earth. Dust rises when the legs settle. The wall feels dry at the moment, but it holds the coolness of the ground. In wet weather, moisture may darken the surface where objects prevent circulation. The bed is pulled slightly away. That narrow gap costs space, but may keep blankets from resting directly against damp sod. It also leaves a place for insects, loose earth, and small objects to disappear. Every solution has its nuisance. The second sleeping place is fitted at an angle that nobody prefers. A chest prevents it from lying straight. The stove requires clearance. The door must open fully. Someone jokes that the room was large before the family brought the family into it. The humour is dry because the problem is real. A one-room shelter does not separate sleeping from cooking, illness, argument, repair, or grief. Smoke from breakfast reaches the blankets. Mud from boots enters the sleeping area. A coughing child keeps everyone awake. A late arrival crosses the same floor where others are trying to rest. The room teaches the household each number's rhythms. You learn who turns often in sleep, who whispers, who breathes heavily, and who wakes before the stove has gone cold. During a storm, this closeness can be exhausting. It can also be protective. If the door moves, several people hear it. If smoke enters, someone coughs. If a child becomes cold, a hand can reach them. If the roof begins to drip, the first drop rarely remains unnoticed. Crowding turns the family into part of the warning system. By evening, the room has taken on layers of use. A peg holds clothing. A shelf keeps food above the floor. Tools are placed where they can be found but not stepped on. A lamp is given a stable position so that a sudden gust through the door will not overturn it. The table shifts twice. At first it blocks the stove. Then it narrows the path to the door. Finally it rests near the wall, slightly crooked because the floor beneath one leg is uneven. A folded scrap corrects the wobble. No drawing planned this arrangement. The room is designed through repeated inconvenience. You carry bedding inside. It smells of sun, grass, wool, and storage. Once spread, it softens the severe shape of the house. The earthen walls no longer surround an empty work site. They surround a household. Outside, the wind rises again. Its pressure reaches the roof as a long passing sound. Inside, the movement is reduced to a low rush and a faint trembling near the stovepipe opening. The beds do not shake. The table remains still. Then the door is opened. Cold air enters at floor level and travels through the room. The lamp flame bends. Loose paper stirs. The person entering pulls the door shut quickly, but the stored warmth has already been disturbed. The house may resist the wind while closed. A household cannot remain closed. People must fetch water, tend animals, empty ash, bring fuel, and move between tasks. Each opening briefly connects the calm interior to the exposed prairie. The arrangement of the room must absorb those interruptions. Wet boots are left near the entrance. Outer clothing hangs where it can dry without touching flame. Fuel is stacked within reach, but away from sparks. Bedding is folded back from the path. The room becomes a system of small distances. At night, those distances determine who loses sleep. The person nearest the stove hears the fire settle. The person nearest the door feels the first draft. The person beneath the ridgepole hears the roof accept each gust. The youngest sleeper may know none of this because several adults have arranged their discomfort around them. You lower yourself onto the chosen bed. From here, the ceiling feels very close. The ridgepole is a dark line overhead. The stove sits only a few steps away. The door is visible in the red light. A hand could reach the child beside you without fully rising. The house now contains everything required for rest. It also contains everything capable of interrupting it. As the lamp is lowered, the first thin stream of cold air touches the floor near the doorframe. Someone notices it with a bare ankle. Tomorrow, the household will begin teaching cloth, paper, mud, and wood to close what the wind has already discovered. The cold reaches the room before anyone sees the gap. It moves low across the packed floor, thin enough to escape notice at first, then gathers around bare ankles and the edge of the nearest blanket. The wall remains still. The roof does not complain. Yet the house is already losing heat through an opening no wider than a finger. Someone kneels beside the door. In daylight, the problem is plain. The frame is not perfectly square. One side touches the wall closely, while the other leaves a narrow dark line. The door itself has warped slightly since it was hung. Dry weather shrank part of the wood. Damp weather swelled another part. Each season changes the fit. The wind only needs what the carpenter could not remove. A strip of cloth is folded and pressed into the opening. Where cloth is scarce, twisted grass, paper, mud, or small pieces of sod may be used. The repair is practical rather than beautiful. It must slow moving air without preventing the door from opening when someone needs water, fuel, or access to the animals. That balance matters. Seal the door too tightly, and it sticks when the household needs it. Leave it too loose, and every gust enters at floor level. The repair must resist pressure while yielding to the hand. You hold the cloth in place while another person drives a small tack into the frame. The fabric hangs like a rough gasket. When the door closes, it compresses against the edge. The draft weakens. It does not vanish. A second current moves near the bottom, where the sill meets the floor. Loose earth has settled away from the wood. A narrow ridge of mud is pressed into the seam, smoothed with fingers, then left to dry. Someone warns that it will crack. Someone else answers that it can be pressed again. Nothing stays finished for long. Walls settle. Frames shift. Mud shrinks. Cloth wears. Paper loosens. Rodents, insects, rain, and repeated use undo careful work. The household creates a barrier that can be renewed, not one that can be forgotten. You move to the window. The frame is small, but the light around it reveals several weaknesses. A corner admits wind. The join between wood and sod has opened. The glass, if the family has glass, does not sit evenly. A cloth curtain may reduce the cold at night, though it also traps dampness and blocks the little light available in the morning. Paper can be pasted over cracks. Mud can be packed around the frame. A board or shutter can cover the opening during the worst weather. Each method improves one condition while reducing something else. More sealing means less light. More cloth means slower drying. More mud means more maintenance. You press a finger near the window edge and feel the air moving. It is sharper than the room around it. The draft is small, but it travels toward the nearest sleeping place. That is enough to decide the repair. The bed is shifted a little farther away. A strip of fabric is added to the window. Loose sod is packed outside where the frame meets the wall. The household does not ask whether the solution is perfect. It asks whether someone will wake less often tonight. By afternoon, the door and window look slightly untidy. Strips overlap. Mud darkens the frame. Paper covers a crack. A folded cloth lies ready to place along the sill after everyone is inside. None of it resembles a finished modern interior. It resembles attention made visible. The chimney opening receives the same attention, though more cautiously. The stovepipe must pass through the roof without allowing rain, sparks, or too much wind to enter. Pack the opening carelessly, and heat may reach dry material. Leave it open, and air and water follow the pipe downward. The family checks the edge where metal meets earth. A gust crosses the roof. The stovepipe vibrates. Dust falls in a faint line. The opening is packed and shaped again, but never treated as harmless. Warmth requires a deliberate hole in the shelter. The house must breathe through the same place that can betray it. Even the walls are not entirely solid. Sod blocks dry and settle. Fine soil sifts from joints. Small cracks appear where roots no longer hold the surface together. Mud plaster, where available, can smooth the interior and reduce falling dirt. Cloth or paper may cover parts of the wall. Whitewash may brighten the dark room and make surfaces easier to see. These improvements cost time, materials, and repeated labour. A poor household may repair only the places causing the most immediate discomfort, The crack beside a child's bed comes before the loose patch behind a chest. The door receives attention before a harmless shower of dirt from a dry corner. Survival maintenance follows priority, not symmetry. By evening, the wind has strengthened. The household prepares before darkness removes the small defects from view. Fuel is brought inside. Water is placed where it can be reached. The door is closed and tested. A hand passes along the frame. The window covering is secured. Bedding is pulled away from the wall. Then someone opens the door again. A final armful of fuel has been forgotten outside. The careful calm disappears in an instant. Wind pushes inward. The lamp flame bends nearly flat. Cold air rushes around the room. Loose paper lifts from the table. Dust falls from the ceiling layer. The person returns quickly and forces the door closed. Now the new cloth catches at the edge. For one awkward moment, the door will not settle into the frame. The latch misses. The wind presses harder from outside. A hand pulls the fabric free, folds it back, and tries again. The door shuts. The latch drops. Everyone listens. The repair has taught its first lesson. Sealing is not merely stuffing every opening. It is learning how the house moves during use. The cloth is trimmed. The lower fold is moved. The door is opened once more, only a few inches, then closed again. This time the latch catches without resistance. A small success. The lamp straightens. The stove recovers its steady sound. Warmth begins collecting again, first around the iron, then through the crowded room. The cold near the floor remains, but it no longer travels as freely. You lower yourself onto the bed and feel the difference. The house is quieter now. The wind still moves over the roof and around the corners, but fewer sharp currents cross your skin. The shelter demands less immediate attention. That is what each repair buys, a longer interval before someone must rise. The family settles. The folded cloth is pressed along the lower door seam. A coat is hung near the coldest part of the wall. Someone places a hand near the window and decides the remaining draft can wait until morning. The lamp is lowered. In darkness, the house becomes a collection of sounds rather than surfaces. The roof shifts faintly. The stovepipe hums. A board near the door taps once, then stops. You hear the ridgepole give a short, dry creak. Last night. That sound pulled your eyes open. Tonight. Before fear can arrive, someone beside you whispers that it is only the roof taking the gust. The words are quiet, but they change the room. The family has begun to name the house's noises, and once each sound has a meaning, sleep will depend less on blocking the wind than on knowing when the house is truly asking for help. The whisper changes what you are listening for. A moment earlier, the ridgepole sounded like a warning because it was unfamiliar. Now the same creak has been placed inside a pattern. The gust arrived first. The roof accepted the pressure. The timber answered once. Then the room became still again. Nothing followed. That final silence matters. You remain awake, but your task has changed. You are no longer waiting for the house to prove that it is dangerous. You are learning how it behaves when it is safe enough. The difference is made from sequence, repetition, and the memory of earlier nights. Wind reaches the western wall with a low push. The stovepipe hums. A few grains of dry soil fall near the door. The ridgepole gives one short complaint, then the pressure passes. Over time, the household begins to recognize this chain. Each part has a cause. The wall does not shake. The door does not jump against the latch. Smoke does not spill from the stove. No steady stream of dirt follows the roof noise. Ordinary movement ends where it began. Danger usually continues. A harmless tap may stop after one gust. A loose board becomes more regular. A settling roof gives a dry sound and then rests. A shifting support may creak again under less pressure. The chimney problem changes the smell of the room. The house does not speak in words. It speaks in changes. You lie beneath the ridgepole and begin sorting them. The lowest sound comes from wind travelling over the roof. It is broad, almost like distant water. The whistle near the window belongs to a remaining gap. The dull tap by the door comes from wood touching wood. Scratching in the wall may be grass, an insect, or a small animal exploring the warm edge of the room. None of these sounds invites sleep. They become sleepable because they are known. The child beside you shifts beneath the blanket. A foot presses against your leg, then relaxes. Across the room, someone breathes evenly. The stove gives a soft metallic click as its iron cools. That click once caused you to sit upright. Now you know it comes after the fire settles. Knowledge removes effort from the body. Your shoulders no longer tighten at every noise. Your breathing no longer waits between gusts. You still listen, but you spend less strength. The household builds an internal map of the night. A roof sound above the table means something different from one near the chimney. A draught beside the bed may be uncomfortable but stable. A sudden current from the opposite wall suggests that a covering has loosened. Dirt falling in one brief sprinkle may be ordinary. Dirt falling in repeated pulses asks for light. Even the wind has variations. A long, steady pressure may hold the door firmly in its frame. A violent change of direction may pull at roof edges and rattle quiet fittings. Rain alters every sound, making sod heavier and softening the surface above. Snow muffles some noises while increasing the load. The same house has several voices because the weather gives it several burdens. You learn them without a manual. An older neighbour may explain what a lifting roof sounds like. A family member may remember how the chimney behaved before smoke entered. Children learn which noises wake the adults and which are ignored. Everyone gathers fragments of experience. Some lessons arrive through embarrassment. One night, a person rises because of scratching near the wall, lights the lamp, moves a chest, and finds only dry grass rubbing outside. Another night, everyone ignores a familiar tapping until a covering loosens and cold air pours across the floor. The household adjusts. Fear becomes more precise. That precision matters because sleep cannot survive constant alarm. A family exhausted by hauling water, cutting fuel, tending animals, cooking, washing, repairing, and preparing fields cannot spend every windy night fully awake. Ignoring the house entirely would be equally dangerous. So the night develops thresholds. One creak. Listen. A second creak in the same place. Open your eyes. A new draft. Reach a hand into the air. Smoke. Sit up. Repeated movement at the door. Rise. A heavy shifting sound above. Wake another adult. The rules differ by household and are rarely spoken so neatly. They live in habit. The body performs them before the mind gives them names. Tonight, a gust arrives from a different direction. The window cloth flutters once. The stovepipe hum becomes rougher. A thin vibration travels through the ridgepole. You feel the old alarm begin. Then you wait. The vibration ends. The cloth settles. The stove continues drawing properly. No cold stream crosses the bed. You remain beneath the blanket. This is competence. You have judged the sound and decided that the best action is no action. Rest is part of survival because tomorrow will require strength. Rising unnecessarily would release warmth, disturb the children, consume lamp oil, and shorten sleep. The ability to stay in bed can be as practical as the ability to leave it. Later, another noise comes from the door. Not the familiar tap. This one drags. Your eyes open. The sound repeats, lower and longer. Something is moving against the outer surface, or the lower edge is rubbing where it did not rub before. You extend your foot toward the floor and feel for cold air. There is none. Across the room, the other adult has heard it too. You both wait through one more gust. The dragging sound does not return. Perhaps debris struck the door and passed on. Perhaps a loose object outside shifted once. The lack of repetition changes the judgment. No one rises. The house returns to its known sounds. This is the midpoint of the night and of your understanding. Until now, every improvement seemed designed to make the storm quieter. Lower ground, thicker walls, a heavier roof, tighter cracks, better arrangements. Complete quiet was never possible. The real system is also perceptual. The family survives because the house reduces the storm enough for human judgment to operate. The walls slow force soften it and translate it into clues that can be read from bed. Earth turns force into sound. Timber turns weight into movement. Cloth turns a draft into a flutter. The chimney turns wind direction into tone. Your senses become another layer of shelter. That layer has a cost. Someone must learn it through interrupted nights. Someone must remember which sound came before a leak, which smell came before smoke, which tremor was harmless, and which one led to repair. Experience enters the household through tired bodies. The younger children inherit safety without yet understanding its language. They sleep because others listen. You hear one of them breathing softly now, unaware of the calculations taking place around the room. The sound is small, regular, and warmer than anything coming from the roof. The stove settles lower. The wind continues. Your eyes close again. You are no longer waiting for silence. You are waiting only for change. And as the familiar noises repeat without worsening, the house permits a deeper kind of rest, one built on the knowledge that someone inside will notice when its voice becomes unfamiliar. The unfamiliar voice never arrives. Instead, the known sounds continue through the darkness. Wind crosses the roof. The stovepipe answers. The door gives one brief tap. Then the room settles again around the breathing of the sleepers. But not everyone is sleeping in the same way. The youngest child has surrendered fully. Their body is heavy beneath the blanket, one hand open near the pillow. Another child turns once and stops. Someone near the wall breathes with the deep regularity of a person who has worked beyond tiredness. Across the room, one adult remains close to waking. The eyes may be closed. The body may even drift. Yet part of the mind stays beside the stove, the latch, the ridgepole, and the animals outside. Rest has become divided labour. No one announces that one person will listen from midnight until 2 while another takes the hours before dawn. Sometimes duties are agreed upon. More often, they settle according to habit, exhaustion, age, health, and expectation. The person nearest the stove wakes when the iron changes tone. The person nearest the door feels the draft first. The person most worried about the livestock hears every distant impact as a possible gate or roof board. Another household member may sleep through all of it because tomorrow's fieldwork will require strength, or because they are ill, or because someone else has quietly accepted the night. You lie beneath the ridgepole and notice how the room distributes wakefulness. A gust presses the door. The person closest to it opens their eyes. The latch holds, no draft follows, the eyes close again. But the waking has already cost something. Sleep does not always return at the same depth. The body remains slightly prepared. From outside, the sod house would appear quiet. No one is running through the storm. No roof has lifted. No lamp burns at the window. Yet inside, a person is measuring each sound, adjusting blankets, remembering fuel, and calculating how long the fire can fall before the room becomes too cold. No child wakes. No spark reaches the bedding. No door opens unexpectedly. The calm leaves little evidence of the work that created it. The stove gives a low click. Movement comes from the bed nearest it. A blanket shifts. Bare feet touch the packed floor. The person does not light the lamp. Firelight is enough. They cross the few steps to the stove, crouch, and open it with care. Too much air might make the fire flare. Too little fuel might allow it to die before morning. A small piece is added. The door closes. The person remains there for a moment, listening to the draw of the chimney. Wind can change how smoke moves through the pipe. If the room stays clear and the flame settles, the adjustment is finished. They return to bed. The entire act takes less than a minute. The youngest child never moves. One answer to the title is that some homesteaders slept because someone else did not sleep deeply. The room shows this more clearly than any family legend could. Safety passes through ordinary acts. A blanket pulled higher, a draft checked with a bare foot, a stove fed before the coals vanish. Outside, something strikes the side of the house. The sound is dull and heavy enough to wake several people. Breathing changes. No one speaks at first. The person nearest the door sits up. Another adult listens toward the roof. You wait for a second impact. It does not come. Perhaps a loose object crossed the yard. Perhaps packed grass or debris struck the wall. The sod did not shift. The window covering remains still. The chimney continues its known hum. One by one, the sleepers lower themselves again. The person who sat up remains listening longer. The body returns to bed. The mind walks outside. It crosses the yard, checks the roof edge, reaches the shed, tests the gate, and counts the animals without moving from the blanket. You begin to see why exhaustion can be both protection and risk. Hard work makes sleep arrive quickly, even under bad conditions. It can also make a person miss the sound that matters. A household, therefore, depends on overlapping attention. One sleeper hears the stove. Another notices the child. Another recognizes the door. Another knows the animals. The system is imperfect, but it does not rest on one sense alone. Near midnight, the wind steadies. The constant wind can become easier to sleep through than a changing one. The house accepts continuous pressure. Loose objects stop beginning and ending their movement. The ear grows accustomed to the broad rush above. The person beside the stove drifts more deeply. An older child wakes at the change in breathing and looks across the room. For a few seconds, the child seems ready to rise, copying the adults without knowing whether anything is wrong. You lift one hand from the blanket and lower it again. Stay there. The gesture is enough. The child settles, but not before pulling the nearest cover over a smaller pair of feet. The movement is clumsy and half asleep, yet it saves another person from waking when cold reaches the edge of the bed. Even the youngest members of the household begin learning that rest is something people make for one another. They learn it through gestures, through who reaches the stove, through who remains still, and through the quiet permission to sleep when another person is listening. No signal passes between the adults. Still, the room changes hands. The ridgepole remains inside your attention now. The next creak belongs to you. You did not agree to take a turn. No one asked. It happens because the sound above remains clear after the others have released it. The ridgepole gives its familiar, dry answer. You wait. The door holds. The chimney remains clear. The sleepers breathe. For several minutes, you guard the room simply by noticing it. There is no heroism in this. You are warm enough, tired enough, and afraid enough to listen carefully. The house protects you while you protect the possibility of rest inside it. Then the wind softens for a moment. Your vigilance loosens with it, before sleep returns. You understand that the family's quiet is renewed through small acts: fuel added, fabric adjusted, sounds judged, children covered, fears contained. Someone remains close enough to waking for the system to work. And before dawn, that person will need fuel worth burning on a landscape where wood is scarce and warmth cannot be taken for granted. The fuel waiting beside the stove does not look like a forest. There are no neat stacks of split hardwood rising against the wall. On much of the Great Plains, Trees are limited to riverbanks, creek bottoms, planted groves, or distant settlements. A family can burn wood when it can be cut, hauled, bought, or spared, but wood is rarely so abundant that every cold and windy night becomes simple. The stove asks for heat anyway. Beside it lies a pile of coarse grass twisted into dense lengths. The bundles are rough, light, and full of handwork. Loose grass burns too quickly. Twist it tightly, and more material can be fed into the stove at once. The fire lasts a little longer. The person tending it may gain a few more minutes beneath the blanket. The improvement is modest. At night, modest improvements become sleep. A recorded homesteader memory described family members taking turns twisting slough grass because there was no wood and coal was too expensive. Other households used what their place and season supplied: corn cobs, corn stalks, hay, dried animal dung, purchased coal, or precious pieces of wood saved for starting and steadying a fire. Tonight, the twisted grass carries most of the burden. Several bundles have been prepared before dark and stacked where a sleepy hand can find them without reaching across the hot stove. You pick up one bundle. It is rough against the palm and tighter at one end where the stalks were turned together. Hands worked it into a form that would fit the stove and burn more steadily than loose stems. The twisting took time that might have gone to mending, cooking, washing, animal care, or rest. The bundle is stored labour. When placed in the stove, it becomes stored warmth. You open the iron door. Air enters, and the remaining coals brighten. Wind above the chimney draws at the fire, making light shift across the room. You push the grass inward and close the door before loose ends or sparks can escape. The flame rises quickly. For a moment, the stove sounds satisfied. Then the bundle begins to settle. Even tightly twisted grass cannot imitate a heavy hardwood log. It burns faster, leaves a different ash, and demands attention sooner. The family has lengthened the interval, not escaped the need to wake. A house built from earth can slow heat loss, but it cannot produce heat. Its thick walls moderate the room. They reduce direct drafts and resist rapid changes better than thin, exposed boards. Yet the door still opens. The chimney still carries warm air upward. The window and roof still lose heat. Bodies, damp clothing, and cold objects absorb warmth. The stove must replace what the night removes. You return to bed and listen. The fresh fire makes several small sounds inside the iron. Grass snaps. Air rushes through the draft opening. The stovepipe gives a faint expanding click. The room warms unevenly. Nearest the stove, a face may feel almost hot, while feet remain cold. Across the room, a sleeper near the wall notices little change at first. Warm air rises. The packed floor holds the chill. Blankets and shared body heat do as much for sleep as the fire itself. A heavy blanket does not have to warm the whole house. It preserves the small climate around a body. Several people sharing a bed, or sleeping close together, reduce the surface exposed to cold air. Clothing may remain on, especially when rising during the night is likely. Comfort becomes local. The household keeps the stove alive enough to prevent the room from becoming dangerous or unbearable, while blankets, clothing, and sleeping arrangements protect individual bodies. This saves fuel. It also makes the walk from bed to stove feel colder. When the fire weakens again, you place your feet on the floor. Cold enters through them immediately. The few steps to the stove feel longer than they did before sleep. You crouch and open the door. The grass is burned down to a fragile red layer. A piece of wood would last longer. So might coal. But the household may be saving those for colder weather, cooking, illness, or a time when the chimney needs a stronger fire. Tonight, the cheaper fuel must carry most of the burden. You add another bundle. A loose end catches before the door closes. Flame runs along it faster than expected. Your hand withdraws. The door shuts. For a second, the room fills with a sharper smell. No spark has reached the floor, but everyone nearest the stove stirs. Fast fuel can turn from insufficient to aggressive without warning. Warmth and hazard are separated by a small iron door. You adjust the draft to reduce the rush of air. The flame settles. This judgment is acquired through repetition. Too little air produces poor burning and smoke. Too much may consume fuel rapidly, overheat part of the stove, or encourage sparks. Wind outside changes the chimney draw, so the setting that worked earlier may not work now. The household tends a relationship between stove, pipe, fuel, room, and weather. You remain crouched until the sound becomes steady. Behind you, a sleeper turns and pulls the blanket closer. No one asks whether the fuel is elegant or pleasant. The room is warmer. That is its argument. In daylight, fuel scarcity shapes the entire claim. Trips to obtain timber consume time and animal strength. Purchased coal ties warmth to cache and transport. Corn cobs burned tonight cannot be used elsewhere. Grass gathered for the stove cannot feed an animal. Each choice moves scarcity from one task to another. The fire begins to fade again, more slowly this time. The new bundle was twisted tighter. It holds its shape, giving the stove a steadier glow. You return beneath the blanket. Your feet take time to warm. The person beside you shifts closer without waking. Outside, the wind continues over the roof, but the room has regained its quiet balance. The ridgepole creaks once. The stove answers with a soft pulse of flame. For a while, no one needs to move. This interval is the reward for cutting, gathering, drying, hauling, twisting, saving, and choosing before night. The family has purchased perhaps another half hour of sleep. Then the chimney note changes. It becomes lower and less steady, as though the wind has placed a hand over the top of the pipe. The flame inside the stove bends. A faint smell of smoke reaches the bed. Fuel has kept the house warm. Now the household must make sure the fire does not turn the shelter against them. The smoke reaches you before the room visibly changes. It is only a faint edge in the air at first, sharper than warm iron and old ash. You lift your head from the blanket and breathe once more to be certain. The smell remains. Across the room, someone is already sitting up. No one panics. Smoke has many possible causes. The stove door may not have closed fully. Fuel may be smouldering near the opening. Ash may be blocking the flow beneath the fire, or the wind above the roof may have changed the chimney draw and pushed part of the exhaust back toward the room. The difference matters. You leave the bed. Cold rises through your feet as you cross the packed floor. The stove is still glowing. No flame has escaped. No ember lies outside the iron. The door is shut, though one corner of its seal appears darker with soot. You place a hand near it without touching the metal. The smoke is not coming strongly from there. Your eyes move upward to the stovepipe. It passes from the stove toward the roof in dark sections joined together. Each joint must remain fitted. Each section expands and contracts as it heats and cools. Wind can make the pipe vibrate where it leaves the roof. Soot gathers inside. A small weakness anywhere along that route can alter the room. The pipe gives another low note. Then the flame inside the stove bends. The wind has changed direction. Outside, air crosses the chimney top at an angle that reduces the upward pull for a moment. Instead of carrying smoke steadily away, the system hesitates. The room receives what the chimney cannot immediately lift. You adjust the stove draft. Too much air entering below the fire may make it burn aggressively. Too little may allow the fuel to smoulder and produce more smoke. The correct opening depends on the fuel, the heat of the pipe, and the wind above it. There is no single setting for the whole night. You open the draft slightly. The fire brightens. Warmer gases begin moving upward with greater force. The stovepipe clicks as its metal expands. Smoke near the ceiling thins rather than thickens. Everyone waits. This waiting is part of fire tending. A quick adjustment must be given time to show whether it helped. Opening the stove repeatedly can release more smoke and sparks. Changing several things at once makes it harder to know which action mattered. The chimney note steadies. A child coughs once, turns, and falls quiet. The adults remain awake a little longer. Fire is the most useful dangerous thing in the room. It cooks food, dries clothing, warms water, protects fingers and feet, and allows sleep through cold weather. Yet the shelter is made partly from grass, wood, fabric, and other materials that fire understands very well. The stove creates safety by containing flame. Every opening challenges that containment. The door must open for fuel. The draft must admit air. The pipe must pass through the roof. Ash must be removed. Each necessary break in the system becomes a place where care replaces certainty. You examine the floor near the stove. The packed earth does not burn, which is one small advantage. But dry grass carried in on clothing, loose paper, kindling, bedding, and hanging garments may all be close enough to receive a spark. The crowded room offers little unused space. A coat is moved farther from the pipe. A fuel bundle is pushed away from the stove door. The lamp is checked. Nothing has ignited. The danger is reduced through ordinary tidiness, the kind that becomes difficult when everyone is tired and the room is full. Another gust strikes the house. The chimney responds with a sudden hollow pulse. The fire flares behind the stove door. A few bright points rise inside the pipe. You listen for them. Sparks travelling upward are expected, but a chimney containing soot can become dangerous if heat ignites the deposits inside. A roaring sound, unusual heat, or sparks escaping above the roof may signal a problem much larger than an ordinary fire. Tonight, no roar follows. Still, the possibility shapes how the stove is used. Fuel is not thrown in carelessly. The pipe must be cleaned when soot builds. Joints must be inspected. The roof around the chimney must be watched for heat damage and leaks. Maintenance performed in daylight protects sleep in darkness. Neglect returns at the worst hour. The smoke smell continues to fade. Someone cracks the door briefly to clear the remaining air. The effect is immediate. Wind presses cold into the room, and the lamp flame leans. The door is closed again before too much heat escapes. Fresh air spreads low across the floor, while the warmer, smoky air moves upward. The child nearest the door is covered more tightly. You return to the stove and reduce the draft slightly, now that the chimney is drawing well. Leaving it too open would consume the fuel quickly. The household needs a stable fire, not a spectacular one. A spectacular fire is wasteful. It may also be frightening. The ideal flame for sleep is almost boring. Steady, contained, hot enough to maintain the room, slow enough to leave time between wakings. You watch until the grass bundle settles into red coals. The iron gives a soft tick. The stovepipe remains warm and quiet. Only then do you return to bed. Your blanket has cooled while you were standing. You slide beneath it and wait for the trapped warmth to gather again. The others settle gradually. Someone whispers that the chimney is drawing properly now. No further explanation is needed. The house has passed another test, but the event changes the night. The smell of smoke has entered everyone's attention. For a while, each breath is examined. Each stove sound feels slightly larger. This is how vigilance grows after a near problem. The danger may have been minor. The body does not know that immediately. It remains prepared. You listen to the relationship between wind and fire. When the wind strengthens, the chimney hum deepens. When it eases, the flame settles. The house and stove are not separate systems. Air moving over the roof reaches into the fire through the pipe and draft. The storm can touch the room without entering through a crack. It enters through pressure. This makes the chimney a kind of instrument. Its sound reports the weather above. A stable hum suggests steady draw. A rough flutter asks for attention. Silence at the wrong moment can be as meaningful as noise. The family learns this language along with the creaks of the ridgepole and the taps of the door. Each object has its own warning. The ridgepole speaks through weight. The door speaks through movement. The cloth speaks through flutter. The chimney speaks through breath. You close your eyes again. The smoke has cleared. The room is warmer than before. The fire is controlled. Yet the memory of the smell remains, a reminder that comfort is never passive here. Someone built the walls. Someone cut the fuel. Someone sealed the cracks. Someone must also keep warmth from becoming flame. Outside, the wind rises and falls in long waves. Inside, the stove gives a steady, low pulse. The rhythm is almost soothing now that you understand it. Then, far beyond the wall, a different sound carries across the yard. It is not timber, cloth, or chimney metal. It is an animal striking wood. Once, then again. The sleepers nearest the door open their eyes. The fire is safe. Now something outside the house may not be. The sound comes again. Wood knocks against wood somewhere beyond the wall, followed by a low animal movement nearly lost under the wind. It may be a horse shifting against a stall, a cow pressing a gate, or a loose board answering the storm. But it is outside. That changes the judgment. Inside the house, you have learned to read the ridgepole, stove, door, and chimney. Outside, darkness removes those references. Wind breaks sounds apart and carries them from the wrong direction. A noise that seems near the barn may come from the shed. A single impact may mean an animal has slipped, a latch has failed, or debris has struck a wall and passed on. You wait for a third sound. It comes, weaker but more urgent. Someone throws back a blanket. The decision is made because waiting may increase the cost. Livestock provide labour, milk, meat, transport, breeding stock, and value representing years of effort. A damaged gate can release animals into darkness. A frightened horse can injure itself. A roof panel moving in the wind can become a larger failure before morning. Sleep yields to uncertainty. You pull on boots without fully lacing them. Clothing left near the bed is dragged over warm night layers. A coat goes on crooked. Hands search for gloves, then give up when one cannot be found. A lantern is prepared, and so is a line. Families did not need a guide rope for every windy night. One recorded homesteader memory describes a clothes line tied between a sod house and a sod barn during a terrible blizzard. Tonight, darkness and driving weather make the same simple precaution worth using. The rope does not calm the yard. It gives your hand one fact the storm cannot erase. One end is secured near the door, the other reaches toward the barn. You wrap your fingers around it before the latch is lifted. Cold enters immediately. The wind pushes the door inward, forcing two people to control it. The lantern flame jumps behind its glass. Dust and loose grass slide across the threshold. For a moment, the warm room is exposed to the whole prairie. You step outside. The door closes behind you with a dull force, and the house vanishes. It is only a few feet away, yet darkness and wind erase its shape. The weak window light reaches nowhere useful. The line in your hand becomes more certain than sight. You lean forward. Each step must find the ground before the next one is trusted. Ruts, tools, frozen clods, mud, and scattered debris wait below the grass. The line tightens between your hand and the distant building. You follow it. During calm weather, this is barely a walk. Tonight, it becomes a narrow journey through moving air. Something strikes your shoulder. Only a handful of grass. The body reacts before the mind identifies it. Your grip tightens. The lantern swings. The flame shrinks, then steadies. Behind you, the sod house remains silent. From the yard, it no longer seems cramped or damp. It is the one place where wind has been reduced enough for people to breathe normally. You keep moving. The barn or shed emerges as a darker mass, its construction may not be as heavy as the house. Timber, poles, sod, earth, or a mixture of materials give animals shelter, but livestock buildings often receive fewer purchased materials and less careful sealing than the family room. The animal strikes the wall again. Now the cause is clearer. A gate or stall board is loosened. Each gust moves it inward. An animal beside it shifts away, then presses forward when the board returns. The repeated impact is not panic yet, but it could become panic. You lift the latch. The door resists under wind pressure. When it opens, the smell of hay, manure, warm animal breath, leather, and damp wood replaces the cold emptiness of the yard. The horse turns toward the lantern. Its eyes catch the light. The animal is awake, muscles tight beneath its coat. A loose board arrives without explanation and can become a threat in the dark. You speak quietly. The words matter less than the familiar human voice. Another person checks the fastening. A nail or peg has worked loose. The repair made now is temporary. Rope around the board, a brace shifted into place, a tool used in poor light with cold fingers. The aim is to stop movement until daylight. The rope is pulled tight. The board stops. The animal continues watching. You run a hand along its neck. Water is checked. Another latch is tested. The roof is listened to from below. Every inspection costs body heat, yet leaving immediately would waste the danger of having come outside. Once a person has surrendered the bed, it is practical to reduce the chance of another trip. The building gives no new warning. The return begins. You step into the wind and find the line with your free hand. The sod house is invisible again. Without the rope, a person might walk off course, especially in blowing snow or dust, and discover too late that the expected door is not ahead. Wind changes balance, darkness removes scale. Even experienced people can misjudge distance when the world has been reduced to pressure and noise. The line corrects each drift. Your hand slides along it, knot by knot. The lantern reveals only the ground before your boots. That is enough. A safe route does not require seeing the whole yard. It requires one reliable connection between the place you left and the place you must reach. At last, the house appears as a low shadow. Someone inside waits near the door. The latch lifts before you knock. Warm light opens in a narrow rectangle, and the wind attempts to enter with you. You cross the threshold. The door is forced shut. The line remains outside, tied and ready. Cold clothing releases dust and moisture into the room. Boots mark the floor. The lantern is set down. Someone asks what happened, and the answer is brief. One loose board. Tied for now. Animals safe. That report allows several bodies to relax at once. You remove the coat, but keep it close. The bed has cooled. Your hands ache as feeling returns. Outside, the repaired board no longer strikes the wall. The absence of the sound becomes the night's new reassurance. You lie beneath the ridgepole again and understand the protection extends through paths, ropes, routines, outbuildings, animals, and people willing to leave warmth when something changes beyond the wall. The wind remains strong, but the yard is connected by one taut line, and the animal shelter has become quiet. Then a cold drop lands beside your face. You touch the blanket. Another drop follows from directly above. The roof has begun to answer the storm in water. The second drop lands on your cheek. You wipe it away and look upward, though the darkness shows almost nothing. The ridgepole remains where it should be. No soil is falling. No timber has shifted. Yet a third drop forms somewhere above and releases itself onto the edge of the blanket. Rain has found the roof. Outside, wind drives water across the sod rather than letting it fall straight down. It presses rain into seams around the chimney opening, beneath grass and along shallow places where the surface has settled. A roof that resisted dry wind through weight must now resist water through shape, compaction, and repair. The two tasks are not the same. Heavy earth is difficult for the wind to lift. Wet earth becomes heavier still. Someone lights the lamp. The room returns in fragments. Stove, door, lifted faces, the dark ridgepole, and one bright drop gathering beneath it. A bowl is moved from the table. The next drop strikes its bottom with a clean sound. You pull the bedding away from the wet place. The room is crowded, and there is nowhere convenient to move it. One corner is colder, another lies too close to the stove. The path to the door must stay open. The safest solution is only a few inches of distance and a folded blanket beneath the damp edge. Comfort yields before safety does. That is often how storm damage begins inside a house. Not with collapse, but with inconvenience slowly occupying more space. Another drip appears near the table. A second container is found. Pans, cups, bowls and buckets become part of the roof for the night. They do not stop water from entering. They keep it from spreading across bedding, food, clothing, and the packed floor. Each vessel buys time until daylight permits work above. Rain changes the house's language. The broad rush over the roof becomes a soft, continuous beating. Water travels through sod before showing itself, so the place where it falls may not be where it entered. A seam near the chimney can guide moisture along a pole. A shallow depression outside can collect rain until it finds a weak layer. The roof hides its root. You touch the timber near the first leak. It is damp but firm. That matters. A wet surface is unpleasant. A softening support is dangerous. Fingers move along the ridgepole and smaller roof pieces within reach, checking for a change in texture, sag, or movement. Nothing feels unstable. For now, the problem is water. Above you, every sod block is absorbing part of the storm. Roots help hold the earth together, but water increases the burden on poles and walls. The family can only read that load through sound, shape, and what falls into the room. A creek passes along the ridge. Everyone stops. The creek ends. No soil follows. No beam shifts. The lamp remains steady. Breathing resumes. The pans begin their irregular music. One drip comes every few seconds. Another arrives in pairs, then pauses. A third appears near the chimney, where the roof has always required attention. Someone moves the fuel farther away. Dry fuel is too valuable to lose. Grass bundles absorb water quickly. Damp fuel smokes, burns poorly, and turns tomorrow night's warmth into another problem. Clothing, food sacks, papers, and bedding are shifted according to the same order of need. The room is rearranged again. During the day, furniture was placed for movement and heat. During a wet windstorm, it is placed according to the roof. The table slides beneath a dry section. A chest is pulled from the wall. One bed shifts toward the center. A child, barely awake, is lifted beside another sleeper. The child protests once, then settles beneath shared blankets as the night changes shape. Adults continue working around that sleep. A cloth is pressed against one damp patch, not to seal it, but to guide the water toward a container. The fabric darkens and begins to drip from its lowest point. A scattered leak becomes a controlled one. Other families remembered the same indignity. In one Nebraska account, water reached a bed beneath the ridge log and a dishpan was fastened above the sleepers. Your own bowl remains on the floor, but the principle is identical. The household cannot stop the storm tonight, so it teaches the water where to fall. The wind intensifies and rain strikes the door. Water appears beneath the sill where yesterday's mud seal has cracked. A rag is pushed against it. The draft weakens, but the rag soon becomes cold and wet. Another piece is added behind it. The house is fighting water at several heights. Roof, window, door, wall joint. Every opening previously managed for air becomes a possible path for rain. You understand why a shelter cannot be judged only on the day it is built. Dry weather hides weaknesses. The first long storm reveals where roof layers settled unevenly, where earth is too thin, where the chimney opening was packed poorly, and where wall meets timber without enough protection. A family learns the true design of the house from leaks. Some floors can be repaired after one storm. Others return every wet season. A depression on the roof may need filling. Grass and soil may need replacing. A chimney seam may need reshaping. Water channels outside may need clearing so runoff moves away from the walls. The roof survives because it is repeatedly corrected. For tonight, correction means keeping belongings dry and watching for structural change. You empty one bowl into a larger bucket. Water falls into a dish used for meals. Then is poured into another container. This ordinary sequence protects the bed. The bowl returns beneath the drip. Its tapping begins again. After a while, the first pan quiets. A different one grows louder. The leak has moved. You follow it with the lamp and find a wet line along a smaller roof pole. Water has travelled from somewhere near the ridge. It reaches a knot, gathers, and falls. The ridge pole remains firm. That dark central line still carries the roof, but it no longer seems invulnerable. It is a working object under load, surrounded by materials that swell, settle, soak, and dry. The family's trust becomes exact. You trust that the leaks can be managed while the supports hold. Near the bed, the blanket edge is damp. You fold it inward and place a dry layer over the sleeper. The wet portion will need air and perhaps sunlight tomorrow. For now, body heat must be preserved around what remains dry. Wet earth deepens the room's scent. Damp wool, smoke, grass, and mud gather beneath the roof. The house feels less like a sealed refuge and more like prairie temporarily arranged around human life. That arrangement is holding. The walls remain steady. The animals outside are quiet. Water falls into bowls rather than onto faces. The night is made from these modest victories. Eventually, the leak nearest your bed slows enough that the container can remain without constant attention. The lamp is lowered. People settle into altered places. One person stays awake longer, counting drips and listening for creaks that continue after each gust. You lie beneath the ridgepole again, no longer directly beneath the wet seam. The bowl receives one drop, then another. Between them, there is enough silence for sleep to begin returning. By morning, the family will have to climb above this room and confront the soaked surface. There, under a pale sky, the difference between a leaking roof and a failing one will become impossible to ignore. Morning does not make the roof lighter. It only makes the damage visible. Under a pale sky, you stand beside the house and look upward. The wind has weakened, but the sod above the room is dark with water. Shallow hollows have collected rain. One edge appears lower than it did yesterday. Grass lies flattened along the slope, showing where water travelled before entering the roof. From outside, the leak has no single beginning. A drip beside the bed may have started several feet away. Water can move beneath the surface, follow a root layer, travel along a pole, and fall only when it reaches a knot or low point. Patching directly above the bowl might solve nothing. You climb carefully. Every step adds weight to a structure already carrying wet earth. The roof surface feels soft beneath your boots. Mud clings to the soles. You keep close to the strongest known supports and avoid the section that sounded different during the night. The ridgeline is examined first. Near the chimney, the earth has pulled away slightly from the metal. Rain found that narrow channel and followed it downward. Elsewhere, a depression formed where loose soil settled after dry weather. Water remained there long enough to soak through the upper layers. Fresh sod is brought up. Loose earth is packed into the hollow. The surface around the chimney is reshaped so water is encouraged away from the opening. Grass and roots are pressed into disturbed places. Hands smooth the mud, knowing that sun, frost, and rain will alter it again. Then someone calls from inside. The bowed pole is easier to see in daylight. You climb down and stand beneath it. The curve is slight, but it was not there when the roof was first covered. Wet earth has increased the load. The pole still carries weight, yet its centre sits lower than the neighbouring supports. Replace it would mean opening the roof. Sod would have to be removed, brush and smaller branches would be lifted. Another long timber would need to be found, hauled, shaped, and raised. The work would require dry weather, spare labour, and material the household may not possess. No one argues about the ideal repair. The ideal repair is unavailable. A straight post is brought inside. The table moves first. Its legs scrape over the packed floor. The chest follows. The bed nearest the centre is turned slightly, leaving one corner too close to the wall. The clear route to the stove narrows. The post is raised beneath the bowed roof pole. Its upper end is wedged into place. Its lower end bites into the packed earth. A second person watches the roof while the support is tightened. The timber accepts pressure gradually. Nothing dramatic happens. That is the success. The bowed pole stops carrying the full span alone. Part of the wet roof now travels downward through the new post and into the floor. Then the household discovers the price. The table no longer fits where it stood. One sleeping place must remain at an angle. A person crossing to the stove in darkness will have to remember the post. Someone ties a pale strip of cloth around it so the shape catches lamplight. The roof is safer. The room is smaller. Better timber could remove the post. Rebuilding could remove it. Money, transport, spare labour, and several dry days might remove it. None of those things is available now, so the post remains. The storm has written material limits directly into the room. They appear as lost floor space, a shifted bed, a bruised shoulder waiting to happen, and a table that must stand crooked again. A wealthier household might buy milled lumber or better roofing. A family with strong animals and nearby help might haul a replacement pole. Another household may know exactly what is needed and still lack the cash, health, time, or bodies to do it. Knowledge cannot lift a roof by itself. The new support is checked from every side. Someone presses against it. It does not slip. The roof is watched while a gust crosses the wet surface. A low creak travels through the ridge, reaches the supported pole, and ends. No soil falls. No water appears. The correction works. By afternoon, sunlight dries the upper surface in patches. Wet blankets are aired. Bowls return to the table. The cloth at the door is removed, wrung out, and hung where moving air can reach it. Mud marks remain on the floor beneath the containers. The room does not return to its old arrangement. The post has changed it, permanently. At least until a better repair becomes possible. People must now step around a piece of the roof while living beneath it. That inconvenience becomes memory. A sleepy child will learn not to run toward the stove without looking. The person rising at night will reach out before turning. The table will acquire a new place. Bedding will be folded differently. The household absorbs structure into habit. Before the lamp is lowered, each person walks the altered path once, learning where a hip or shoulder might meet the new timber. This is what the storm has taught by daylight. The sod house can be thick, low, and carefully built. It can soften wind, hold warmth, and remain standing through weather that makes an exposed frame tremble. It can also leak, settle, bow, and demand a support in the middle of the room. Its strength is real. Its limits are real too. By evening, the roof looks ordinary again from outside. Dark patches remain near the ridge, but the hollow has been filled. The chimney seam has been reshaped. The wind moves over the surface without lifting it. Inside, the pale cloth tied around the support post catches the firelight. That strip is now part of the house's night language. The family will not stumble into the post because the repair has been made visible. The same object that reveals shortage also protects the roof and directs movement. No one celebrates it. The stove is prepared. Dry fuel is placed within reach. Bedding returns beneath the ridgepole, though the bed has shifted a few inches from the old leak. The bowl remains nearby, empty and ready. Night approaches again. The wind is lighter, but the household enters darkness with better knowledge. The roof is no longer trusted as a single heavy shield. It is watched as a set of connected materials: wet sod, brush, poles, ridge, support, wall, and floor. When the ridgepole gives its next dry creak, the sound will carry both warning and proof. The next creak comes after midnight. It is the same dry sound you heard on the first night, but it no longer enters the room as a mystery. Wind reaches the roof. The ridgepole accepts the load. The new post beside the table remains straight. No draught touches the floor. No smoke reaches the bed. You listen. The sound ends. Nothing follows. This time, your body does not prepare to rise. You stay beneath the blanket while the house settles around you. The roof has been patched. Damp bedding has dried as much as the day allowed. Fuel waits beside the stove. The loose board near the animals has been tied. The line between house and outbuilding remains within reach of the door. Every weakness revealed by the storm has changed something. The house is not the same house. Neither are you. A fresh wind crosses the prairie, lower and steadier than before. It presses against the wall and moves upward over the sod roof. The building answers with familiar sounds: a soft rush above, a faint hum in the stovepipe, one tap from the doorframe, and the low wooden complaint of the ridgepole. The sounds no longer compete for your fear. They arrange themselves into meaning. The door tap ends because the trimmed cloth allows the latch to sit firmly. The chimney hum remains even because the fire is small and properly drawn. The ridgepole creaks once because the roof shifts under pressure, then becomes still. You know this through evidence gathered by the body. You have felt the draft when a seal failed. You have smelled smoke when the chimney hesitated. You have watched water travel along timber. You have seen a roof pole bend. You have crossed the yard with one hand on a line. The night is easier because its dangers are no longer shapeless. Beside you, a child sleeps with both hands beneath the blanket. The bed no longer sits directly under the old drip. Near the stove, an adult breathes lightly enough to wake if the fire changes. Across the room, another sleeper has surrendered to deeper rest after spending the previous night listening. The household has changed its arrangement around knowledge. No rule has been written. No one announces who will wake first. Yet the room distributes attention quietly. The person nearest the stove listens for iron. The person nearest the door feels the floor air. The person beneath the ridgepole hears the roof. Each sleeper carries one small part of the shelter. This is how homesteaders slept through windstorms on the Great Plains. The storm did not become gentle. Sod did not erase sound, cold, damp, or danger. Sleep came because earth, fire, routine, and trained attention slowed problems enough for someone to notice them before they became disasters. A rise spoiled the wind's clean approach. Low walls reduced the surface it could strike. Root-bound sod gave the house mass. Timber, brush, grass, and earth shared the roof load. Cloth and mud slowed drafts. Blankets protected individual bodies without requiring every corner to be warm. Twisted grass kept a contained fire alive for another interval. The rope outside preserved direction. Experience separated ordinary movement from warning. Each layer reduced how often someone had to leave the bed. That reduction was enough. Sleep did not require perfect safety. It required danger to arrive slowly enough that the household could read it. The ridgepole gives another small creak. You wait through one breath. Then two. The support post remains still. The bowl beneath the old leak is empty. The door holds. The stove continues its low pulse. Your eyes remain closed. Outside, the wind travels over miles of open grass before reaching this claim. It crosses fields, wagon tracks, fences, shallow draws, and the dark shapes of other shelters. Some contain stronger timber or more fuel. Some carry repairs that cannot wait. Some households have neighbours near enough to help. Others meet the weather almost alone. The storm does not make them equal. Inside this house, tonight, the system is holding. That is the answer available here. Modest, local, temporary, and earned. The family has not conquered the plains. The storm remains larger than every object in the room. But large forces do not always need to be conquered. Sometimes they only need to be reduced at the point where they reach the body. The wall takes the first pressure. The roof takes the next. The ridgepole carries weight into the walls, and the new support. The blanket keeps the remaining cold close to the skin, instead of letting it settle deeper. The sleeper receives only what is left. That remainder is small enough for sleep. The stove fades toward coals. No one rises immediately. Sod walls release warmth slowly. Shared blankets hold what the fire has already given. The room cools by degrees rather than all at once. A person near the stove wakes, listens, and decides the coals can wait. Fuel is preserved. Sleep is preserved. The wind begins to change before dawn. Its long pressure breaks into shorter gusts. Between them, the roof rests more completely. The chimney hum softens. Sounds from farther away return, an animal shifting, a loose chain, dry grass brushing the wall. The world outside becomes separate objects again. Darkness remains, but the storm is losing its power to make everything sound like one continuous threat. You wake without knowing exactly why. The room is dim and cool. A faint grey line has appeared around the window covering. The stove holds only a dull red seam. No bowl has filled. No one is standing at the door. Above you, the ridgepole is a dark shape. At the beginning of the night, it seemed to hold the whole uncertainty of the roof. Now it carries the memory of every correction made beneath it and above it. The reset wall, the packed frame, the carefully layered roof, the cloth trimmed so the door could close, the fuel gathered before weather arrived, the chimney watched, the line tied across the yard, the leak contained, the bowed pole supported. None of those actions made the ridgepole stronger by magic. They made the system around it more trustworthy. A final gust travels over the roof. The ridgepole gives one dry knock. Nothing answers it. The bowl beneath the old leak remains empty. The stove holds a dull red line behind its door. Near the entrance, the rope to the barn waits unused. Grey morning gathers around the window covering. No one opens their eyes. The wind moves east across the wet grass, leaving the low house where the prairie was cut, lifted, and taught to stand. Above the bed, the ridgepole remains in place. Beneath it, breathing loses its careful rhythm. For the last quiet minutes before daylight, the household sleeps.